next panel is going to empower you to own your own health. How many of you have been to the doctor and feel like you just don't know what to say, what to do? We're going to get into self-advocacy. Let's bring this amazing panel up. Come on, guys. Oh, they're scared, guys. They're so nervous. Here's our music. We go. All right. Okay. Look at that outfit. Look at this talented panel. So one of my favorite things to do is to let people introduce themselves, tell you what their names are, what they do for a living, and how they're going to help us own our own health and advocate for ourselves. Dr. Williams-Brown, would you like to start?
Great. So thanks for having me. My name is Yvette Williams-Brown. I'm a gynecologic oncologist, and I take care of persons that have cancers or precancers of the female reproductive tract. So that also includes things like ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, cervix cancer.
Great. Paige?
Well, Dr. Williams-Brown is a celebrity in the breastie world, so just have to say that. My name is Paige More, and I am one of the co-founders of the Breasties. We put together free events, trusted resources for those impacted by breast and gynecological cancers, and raise money for stage 4 breast cancer research. I am also a patient advocacy consultant and really believe in empowering those to advocate for yourselves in all aspects of your life, but especially in a medical environment.
Dr. Shiller?
Yes, my name's Michelle Shiller. I'm a molecular genetic pathologist, and I could drop a pathologist joke and say I have to be done now, because if you've heard about pathologists, we tend to not be, the stereotypes that we don't talk much, but I'm an outlier. That's why I do molecular genetics. And so I'm the person who, once Dr. Williams-Brown takes the specimen out, we make a diagnosis, but I'm even further down the line. So if there's testing to be done to try to help identify things for patients, that's me. Also sit on the side of someone who we may be thinking about there's a hereditary predisposition. And I'm definitely a staunch advocate for people being informed about their diagnosis and what needs to happen next, even though on a daily basis I sit behind the scenes kind of looking and analyzing things to try to help people get on the very best path for them.
Amazing. So they're going to tell us how to advocate for ourselves. And I myself am a breast cancer survivor, so I've been through a lot of this from the other end. So I think, thank you. So let's get to it. Let's talk about owning your own health. How can we empower people to, from a physician perspective, from an advocate perspective, what do each of you, how can you help patients own their own health and advocate for themselves? Paige, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things that I like to tell people in the community is that your expertise makes you an expert. Your experience makes you an expert. So I think a lot of times, and with all due respect to medical professionals, you're incredible. You do so many amazing things for the community and for patients like me and like you. However, we have to go into the doctor's office and into our appointments and know that we are the experts in our own personal lived experiences. We know our bodies best. And I think a lot of times we go in and we're afraid. We're afraid that we're not going to be heard. We're afraid that people aren't going to trust our experiences. And so when we go in, we have to know that we are in the driver's seat and that we know what's best and that it's okay to ask for a second opinion if we need it. But I think that's one of the biggest things.
Paige, I love that. And I also think it's we want to be in the driver's seat, but we also need a co-pilot, and often that is what doctors are. So Dr. Williams-Brown, what do you offer to patients, in terms of patient advocacy?
It's a great question. So one of the ways that I try to help patients empower themselves is to help them to understand, just as Paige says, that a lot of what they value, what their beliefs are, what is important to them is really important for me to know and for the care team to know so that we can align the different options that are available with their personal goals. And so I think that's very key, that there's not just one way to do something. I think the key thing is to really understand what it is and what the patient's values are.
Dr. Shiller, what would you like patients to know in terms of advocacy?
I think I would like for patients to know to continue to ask questions. And if you don't feel like your question's being answered, that's your inner voice talking to you, and I think you should continue to pursue that. And I personally believe that if the person you're working with feels threatened by that, then that's also a signal. And it might mean you need to change your course. And that's not always an easy thing to do, especially when you're dealing with a cancer diagnosis. But in the end, it's very important how you feel. It's kind of interesting how we follow the talk on feelings, because your body tells you what you need. And so if your question's not being answered, continue to press until you can get those questions answered.
So speaking of questions, Paige, what are some of the most frequently asked questions you get from patients?
What I get asked the most often is, what should I ask when I go to my next appointment? I think we can't be empowered to get the best care possible if we don't know what to ask. If we don't feel like we're getting presented with all of our options. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that patients, people, women especially, don't want or can't handle all of the information, when that could not be farthest from the truth. We need all of our options presented to us. We deserve to have all of our options presented to us in a way that we can easily digest and understand, because I promise you, as soon as we go home, maybe we don't need it at the time of diagnosis or that first appointment, but I promise you, when we go home that night, we are going onto Google or going onto Instagram or TikTok, and we are trying to devour that information. We're like, wait, what did our doctors just say to us? What did that mean? And that's when you're really going into your community to be like, please explain this to me. What does this mean? And is that the same information that you received? What else can I learn? Because I want to know what's happening to me in my body.
So two things. When I was diagnosed, the best tip I got was bring a friend or a family member or someone to take notes for you. And that was incredibly empowering to me, because I was like, you're my secretary now. I have cancer. So that was very, like, you need that support, because the minute you hear you have cancer or any other diagnosis, that's all you start thinking about. And my friends actually prevented me from Googling, because there was an incident on a train where I was weeping. It's fine. We're over it now. But Dr. Williams-Brown, that first appointment is so scary and so important. What would you recommend to patients, like, in terms of what they should ask and what they should do?
I think it's important at the first appointment to really be able to understand what the goals are of that appointment. So many times when I see patients, or sometimes people may assume that, okay, you're there to hear what I have to say, and then that's the appointment. But that may not necessarily be the case. Sometimes people are coming, as mentioned before, for a second opinion, or maybe they already have a fair amount of information, but they just want to know, is this actually what you would recommend? Would other people recommend this? So I think it's important to say from the beginning, this is what I would like to know. This is the type of information I need to help me to be able to make the decision that I need to move forward.
She gives good first appointment, I can tell. So Dr. Shiller, let's get into the pathology of it all. One of the hardest parts when you get diagnosed is waiting for test results. So what is happening when the biopsy gets sent for results or whatever? Explain that to us.
Yes, well, so first of all, the most important thing I tell my team is, for patients, minutes are hours, hours are days, and days are weeks. So time is of the essence, and the clock is ticking from the time that procedure ends and they wake up from anesthesia. So for pathology, there's a few steps that happen initially. We have to process the specimen. That usually is at least a 24-hour period to get the tissue ready for us to then prepare it to look at on a slide. Then we look at it on a slide, and it is not black and white. Sometimes it is, but not always. So it could be a day or two, just depending. If your procedure is on a Friday, it's likely that we won't know anything till probably Tuesday, because the initial review would come out on a Monday, as an example. So that's part of the reason for some of the time gaps. Now, depending on what that diagnosis might be, particularly because of the topic right now, cancer, then the next question is, what happens next with that specimen? For example, with breast cancer, endometrial cancer, we need to know the hormone receptor status of that. So this is additional testing that we do to the tissue to try to determine if that tumor expresses certain hormones. Why do we do that? Well, Dr. Williams-Brown can answer that even better than me, but it helps to start guiding that therapeutic course. And then in the world of breast cancer, depending on what that is, for example, no estrogen expression, no progesterone expression, and no HER2 expression, that gets labeled as triple-negative breast cancer, and that is a signal to us that this might be a slightly more aggressive behaving cancer, and that we need to ask additional questions so it continues to go down this testing route of genetic testing to start asking additional questions for those therapeutic considerations.
Dr. Williams-Brown, do you want to add anything to that?
I would just add that it is very important to get that specific information, which actually helps us to be able to get to a place where we really are being able to treat people with very precise therapeutics that are designed that treat their cancer individually. So when I was in medical school before, we really just looked at what cancers looked like under the microscope, and that was pretty much how we treated them. We didn't necessarily have any other way to distinguish why some treatments worked on people and other people it didn't work. And I believe that with the new technology and with the new information we have, getting those signatures, getting those receptor signals, we're able to actually get to a place where we can really personalize our treatments for patients.
So, when you're diagnosed, you get so much information like we talked about. And, Paige, maybe you could kick us off here. How do you go about getting the right team? What questions do you ask? How do you navigate being like, oh, I want a second opinion without offending people?
I love this question so much because I think oftentimes we're so afraid of hurting somebody's feelings. And one of the best pieces of advice that I have ever received was, you are not going in there to make friends, which goes against everything I believe in, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I always want to make friends. You're not going in there to make friends. You are going in there for healthcare. And nobody is going to care about your health or your life as much as you do, ever. And so I think going in and knowing, asking the right questions, which we talked about, making sure that you're with a team that trusts you, that listens to you, that believes you and your experiences, makes you feel heard, I think is so important. And knowing that, again, you're not there to make friends, and so it's okay to ask for what you need, to get a second or even third opinion, and then compare, because that is the difference sometimes between life or death and your life or death, truly.
Dr. Shiller, do you want to add anything to that? Because what if someone goes in and their doctor seems upset, like, oh, what? Like offended. How do I navigate that?
I would just be very polite and thank them for their time, and I probably wouldn't tell them straight there in the room that you're gonna get a second opinion, but just reroute, leave the appointment. I am constantly getting pinged, especially on the testing question, particularly in breast cancer, because there are prognostic tests that are used to help guide therapeutic management, and people will ask me, my doctor recommends this test, for example, and sometimes that's the best test and sometimes it's not, and we're behind the scenes so I can direct them. And I've had some people go in and tell their providers that, and I tell them on the front end, if they get offended, you need to be prepared to change your course of care. And so they have done that, although in a couple of circumstances, because I armed those people with the right information to say to the provider, they said, you know what, I think you may be right, and they have redirected that testing course for the patient. So I think it can go a number of ways, but I think if you decide to get a second opinion, I think I'd be polite about it and just thank them for their time and do it, in a little bit quiet fashion. Look for other specialists and then ask for your records on the back end.
So with my treatment, and then I'm going to ask you if you have anything to add from your perspective, I got two oncologists who had vastly different opinions. One wanted to shut the factory down, ovarian shutdown. The other one wanted me to go with a medication that has a lot of studies behind it. And rather than the two of them turning into enemies, they got on the phone, they talked it out. And it was amazing because I really felt like not only was I having to advocate for myself, but they were advocating for me and everyone. And my main oncologist, who we ended up not going with his treatment, he said to me, he's like, no, I talked to Dr. Friedman and she was right. This was what we should have done.
Wow.
And he explained his reasoning, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the transparency too. So Dr. Williams-Brown, when someone comes in to you, how do you take the question? Do you encourage them to get a second opinion?
Absolutely. I think it's very important for patients to feel comfortable to receive the information from me or for wherever they feel like they can get that information that's going to help them make the best decision. So, our main goal as healthcare professionals should be to actually help the patient get better. And if that's not with me or if that's not with my team, then I have no ego in having someone being able to go to a different care team that's going to be able to get them to the place where they need to be.
That's incredible.
Yeah, Paige, I wanted you to add to that. Like, what are the different types of patients you encounter? Because not all of us are the same. Some of us don't mind being like, I'm getting a second opinion, and I want you to know that. But there are others who are, doctors do know more than us about this, and have all these degrees and are in these positions for a reason. So how do I navigate that without insulting them and also like making sure I'm still getting the best healthcare?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. That's exactly what I wanted to add. Was I think one of the best questions, and I'm curious actually what both of you think about this too, is I think one of the best questions you can ask when you're presented with information is this the best option for me, or is this what you're best at? And what are all of my options available? And if the option that is best for me isn't what you're actually best at, do you have a referral to somebody who is best at that? And I think that's an amazing place to start, because then you don't have to necessarily be the most outspoken. You don't have to be the most well-versed at patient advocacy or even self-advocacy, but I do think it's a nice starting point and just a very simple, as you said, polite question to just say, what are all of the options, not just the one that you're best at?
Oh, that's a brilliant way to put it.
Oh, thanks.
Dr. Shiller, do you have anything to add to that?
I think that is wonderful, and I love to hear how you were able to get your team to collaborate together for you. And the providers, because I deal mostly with the providers, I have great confidence when I have that provider asking me, they'll call me, what does actually this finding mean? Because there is a study, maybe not at our institution, but there's a study in the state, the patient can travel to it, maybe, so they're actually looking for that best option for the patient, not what they're best at. I think that's a very brilliant question.
And also, like, just taking what you all have said, if you go in with a list of questions, get those questions answered. And if they don't answer one or they make you feel bad for asking it, listen to your gut. Because that's what I did. When he first proposed something, I was really upset about it. It was something that comes with like really harsh side effects. So I advocated for myself mainly because I was advocating for like my whole body. I was like, no, this is going to drastically change my life. What else is there? So let's talk a bit about health disparities. I want to talk about like how you see it in your work. Who would like to start on that? Dr. Williams-Brown?
Sure. So unfortunately, just like in many other areas in healthcare, there are disparities in gynecologic cancers. For instance, there are more white women who are diagnosed with ovarian and uterine cancer compared to black women, for instance. But unfortunately, black women die at a much higher rate despite having less numbers. So, I think that the healthcare system is just another example of how the pressures of systemic racism can infiltrate so many other aspects of our lives, including healthcare, unfortunately.
Guys, how do you see it? Like, do you see these health disparities in your work, and how do you help patients navigate them? Paige, you want to do it, or Dr. Shiller?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this. I think that if you say that you're not seeing health disparities in your work or disparities in general, then you're trying not to see them, because this is prevalent in every interaction, in every moment, in every part of our lives. And I think that within the Breasties, within self-advocacy, this is something that we're seeing every single day. And as a leader of this organization, especially as a white leader with white privilege, I know that it's on me to protect my community, to help fight for my community, and ensure that we're not only creating a safe space for community members to come to, but ensuring that when we're amplifying the voices of Black and people of color within the community, for those in the LGBTQ plus community, that we're not only saying from the top within our leadership that there's diversity, but that every single leader within our organization is also a safe place to land. And that, to me, comes with ensuring that there's proper training. I think that is so important, because I want to make sure that every single community member that is coming into our organization feels safe, feels welcome, and then also feels equipped with the information to know that they can go back to their healthcare providers to ask the right questions. I also think that it comes to representing diverse stories and within all aspects of our organization. So on the Peak, which is our trusted resource with medically reviewed information, where you can see Dr. Williams-Brown, an incredible story on there, across social media, and ensuring that we're amplifying the voices of breasties of color and breasties in the LGBTQ plus community. And I think something else that's incredibly important is, and our Chief Community Officer, Trish, always says this, and I think it's an incredibly important gut check. You can look her up, Trish, New York City. She's amazing. She says it's so important to listen to the most marginalized person in the room always. And I think that's important for every single person and every single leader, not to ever ask, like, when something happens, whether it's a microaggression or something that is just blatantly racist, to not say, well, devil's advocate, or did you think of this? Like, absolutely not. You listen and you trust the voices and the people in the community, and as she said, the most marginalized voice in the room always, and you protect them and you listen, period. And I think that's very important.
If you're wondering when I fell in love with Paige, it was right there. Dr. Shiller, how about in your work? How do you address health disparities?
Well, first, I want to make this very known here because I don't know how many people realize it, but genetic data is very largely biased towards Caucasian individuals, universally. So I live in this world of disparities. From the rooftops, I have been screaming once I realized this, I learned it in my fellowship, and I've been trying to change it now for, I won't say how long, because then you'll know how old I am, but for a while. And so it is something I'm passionate about. I'm constantly trying to find ways to improve that situation. One way with respect to actual tumor testing that we overcome this at my institution, and I'm grateful and blessed to have providers that work with me that embrace this concept, is reflex testing, meaning that once we as a pathologist make X, Y, or Z diagnosis, without question as to what is the ethnicity, what is the insured status, what is the anything about this patient, the specimen automatically goes for testing. We absolutely need to be asking these questions because we don't fully understand genetically what's happening not only with the cancer in that individual, but from a pharmacogenomics perspective. Even if you know genetically we expect them to respond to X, Y, or Z therapy, the reason they may not respond is because genetically within their drug metabolism they weren't going to, because they are maybe of some other ethnicity or mixed ethnicity. Whatever the case may be, we need to be asking these questions, and reflex algorithms really help us to overcome at least identifying things that are being detected in these tumors and as well in the hereditary space, but that's just step 1 and 2.
I love that. Yeah, let's go out for that. You know, one of the things I have to say, like in my breast cancer journey, you meet so many doctors, so many people, and you hear their stories. And I love hearing how people got into the positions they're in. So I'd love to hear, like, what was the moment that made you kind of go into this work? Dr. Williams-Brown, do you mind sharing that with us?
Sure. So one of the pivotal moments that I remember now, even though it's been, I don't want to say how many years ago it was, I was a medical student, and I remember seeing ovarian cancer in a surgery for the first time and recognizing at the time when she had surgery that it was so advanced that they really couldn't do anything surgically for her at the time. And I walked out with the gynecologic oncologist and spoke to the patient's family with the physician, and just the devastation on her family's face just hearing how advanced it was, and just really not recognizing that it had gotten that advanced, because ovarian cancer, like other cancers, sometimes they can have very subtle signs and symptoms. And the problem with these cancers is that these symptoms, they just don't go away. And sometimes we can think, well, maybe it's this or that, or, you know, we might see someone and they might say, oh, you know, let's just treat you with this, but you're still having problems. So seeing that and seeing how that changed the course of that entire family's life really said to me that I want to be a part of this work, because obviously it's very important, and I felt as if I could be helpful to someone, hopefully throughout the course of their life and their treatment. And I certainly advocate for people that if you have certain things medically that are going on and you're not exactly getting resolution or answers for those things, that it's really important to just really find someone who's going to listen to you. Because as Paige said, you know your body, you know what is right and you know what's not right. And if things are not improving and something is still happening and no one's listening to you, keep going until someone does.
I love that. I love it. Paige, how about you? Tell us your evolution, how you got to this point.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to acknowledge that I'm what they call a previvor. I have a predisposition to cancer, and that's because I have the BRCA1 genetic variant. And even knowing that, similar to what you said, that's a privilege to know that I have a genetic mutation, to be able to have access to genetic testing, to talk to my family about my family history. I recognize how privileged and lucky I am to have that ability. And so at 22, I underwent genetic testing, tested positive for the genetic variant, and at 24 decided to undergo a preventative mastectomy. I had my dream job at the time. I was working as a TV producer for Good Morning America, and I felt on top of the world. I thought that I could do anything, and when I tested positive, I suddenly felt that dream crumble. I was like, oh my gosh, I was just told I have an 87% chance of developing breast cancer, a 60-something% chance of developing ovarian cancer. I've lost almost everyone on my father's side to both these cancers, and I am so afraid. And I tried to find somebody else that had gone through this online. This was back in 2017, which, by the way, getting older is such a privilege. We should be so proud of that. So, guys, like, we're so lucky to get older. It is such a gift. And so that was 2017, and people weren't sharing their stories on Instagram, and TikTok was not a thing yet. And so I tried to find someone else going through this, and I came up empty-handed. And I decided to go through with the preventative mastectomy, and I remember my nurse telling me, she was like, don't look down at your body. You are going to hate your scars. You're going to hate your body. And I found this article online, too, that said the same thing. It was like this woman who had gone through this, and she had a really bad experience. And that's valid for people. Not everybody loves their body after, and that's okay. And I just remember looking down at my body for the first time after my surgery, and I saw my scars, and I felt so sexy and empowered and strong because of this decision that I made. And thank you, yeah, I saw that. And I just wanted other people to know that they could do this too and feel this way. And I really thought about my little sister who's here today. Her name's Cameron. She's 11 years younger than me, and she hadn't gone through genetic testing yet. And I just didn't want her to feel as alone, as afraid as I did. And so she loved Instagram at the time. That was her thing. And we were across the country from each other. And I'm like, how am I going to update her on my experience? And how am I going to, keep her posted? Literally. And so I started posting on Instagram, and I had no idea how it worked. But I just was like, no one else is going to see this but her. It's all for her. And so I started sharing my experience on Instagram. And lo and behold, it's not a private thing. The whole world is on Instagram. And overnight, it was 10, then 20, then 50, then hundreds of people, and then thousands started finding my Instagram account. And we started connecting. And it wasn't just previvors like me. It was survivors. It was those with metastatic breast cancer. It was those that were caregiving. It was all different kinds of people with different cancers. And we started connecting. And I started hosting meetups. And then I connected with my co-founders, all with different stories. One of my co-founders was stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. One has ovarian cancer. One with triple-negative breast cancer. One's a previvor like me, and she's lost her mom. And we came together, and we hosted a retreat. And we took 20 people skiing and snowboarding for the first time since diagnosis. And it was incredible. And after the retreat, people came to us. We had hundreds of DMs, and Breasties were like, when's the next retreat? And we're like, oh my gosh, we have something here. And so we put together the Breasties. We became an official 501c3 nonprofit. And it's been an incredible couple of years. And everything we do is free. So please look us up. We're the Breasties. And that's kind of the story.
Oh, I love that. Dr. Shiller, tell us, how did the path, no pun intended, lead to pathology?
Yes, well, so the pathology path is one thing, but really for me it all comes to genetics. And what drew me to going to genetics is the power of human connection. I hope you guys are all feeling it right now, because I feel it from hearing your story. And human connectivity is what keeps us going. And that in understanding the genetic code, it comes down to the family. A cancer diagnosis is a very personal thing. It's a personal thing, and that person has an entire sphere of influence around them. They may have children, they have friends, they have all of this. So it's that patient and everyone, and to realize the impact you can make, the difference, and we're making significant and positive differences in patients' lives through the looking at the genetics of the cancers, not only in the tumor, but also the predispositions. I'm very passionate about that. And it is changing people's lives. It's taking people to survivorship. I personally have a relative with stage 4 lung cancer, metastatic to the brain, alive almost 5 years right now. It's making a difference. And she works. She works every single day. So that's what took me to this. And I just want to also mention, I am on LinkedIn. I didn't provide that to the group, so if you're looking for me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I just wanted to mention.
Amazing. All right, guys, let's give a round of applause to these guys. And if you take nothing else away, make your friends go to doctor's appointments and take notes. You don't have to have cancer, just do it. They'll do it. Thank you guys. What a great lesson on how to support yourselves and to get your friends to support you too. Thank you guys.
Thank you.